And welcome everybody to Tidal Flooding Talk. I'm Joe Martucci. Joined with me, Dan Skeldon and Palma Shiles. This is a little bit of a special episode here. We actually changed up our schedule a little bit in terms of the release dates for some of these episodes because we wanted to bring on Dan Adams from the Margate Fire Department. We'll have him on in just a minute here. We'll have him talk about where it really was a historic tidal event on August 21st. Where Hurricane Erin, despite being 400 miles away, its eye was about 400 miles away at closest, we had the fifth highest tide on record ever for Margate, and a number of places from Absecon in Atlantic County down south to Cape May saw the highest summertime tide on record. I was in Holgate in Long Beach Island, in Seabright in Monmouth County during the day for Erin. And Dan Skeldon, I have to say, I mean, it was kind of weird to be like, have it so warm outside and have this much flooding at the same time. Because this is something we're talking about in January, February, or March.
Yeah, absolutely impressive. And I thought it was most impressive. It kind of shows you, I mean, forget about like having, a landfall point or an angle of impact or anything. This didn't even make landfall. And like you said, 400 miles away, and you still were breaking records. So pretty scary and pretty like awesome. It's just not where a hurricane tracks. There's so many other factors that go into it. We'll kind of get into that and how an offshore hurricane could be breaking records, pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think the closest, at least in recent memory, comparison we can make was Matthew back in 2017, I believe. Maybe it was 16. I'm forgetting, but it was offshore, and I believe they canceled the AC, one of the beach concerts as a result from the flooding there. Palma, you were in Absecon Island, I think, at least for the 21st. What was it like where you were for that Thursday night specifically?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I moved to my house in Atlantic City in 2020, and this was the first time that it actually flooded up right in front of my house. I mean,
Oh,
I've seen other streets flood like across the harbor from me, but back here was the first time that I've seen it go above the curb line right
yeah.
outside of my house. And even though it was forecasted like to be, major flooding or moderate to major flooding, I don't think that people really thought it was going to get as bad as it did.
I think again, like the summertime tide just kind of lulls people into a sense of security, but that's not the case. And I was making this point, and we'll bring on Dan Adams just a second, but if you're someone who just comes to the shore, for the summer, summer weekend, I mean, you've never seen anything like this because you probably weren't here in Irene in 2011 because there were mandatory evacuations. So this is something that you weren't used to. And Margate, we have Dan Adams on, fire chief here. Just tell us, Dan, going into the event. So before the event, what was the weather information you were taking in, and what were you thinking leading up to that Thursday evening?
Yeah, we were definitely getting prepared. Once we got the information that the tide was looking to be like 7.6 feet, we kind of put into gear in motion a plan, and the plan was to have our high water vehicles readily available. And we positioned one of them at our fire station 1 at Washington Avenue. And we kind of put the message out that, be prepared. There's going to be flooding. And obviously people didn't heed the warnings because of what we, encountered in such a short period of time was pretty amazing. I have to say, I went down and looked at the bay after our commission meeting on that day, and it was probably around 6:30, 6:40, and it was already coming over the bulkhead at Washington Avenue.
Mm.
And when the tide came up, it just never really receded. I compared it to a storm where I remember Ventnor Avenue being flooded the way that this was similar to the January of 2016 nor'easter that we had. And it was very comparable to me as far as the water. Looking back, when Sandy hit us, we were kind of prepared from Irene the year before, but we actually issue all of our personnel waders now as part of our personal protection equipment. And we made sure that everybody had their waders out and were ready to go. And like you said earlier, the weather was kind of extreme to see. You wouldn't expect this kind of storm, to be going on when it's bright and sunny out. And all it was tidal flooding, and it really hit our low-lying, flood-prone areas in Margate City.
Yeah,
Let me just follow up with this for people who aren't aware of Margate. Can you tell us what the island is like in terms of geography and, where would flood and how that relates to some of your critical infrastructure?
Well, it's kind of funny you say that, but we talk to certain people. There's areas of town that flood during every rainstorm. We get a strong rainstorm that comes through, drops a couple inches of water. We have areas of town not near the bay that flood predominantly. We're located, we have water on both sides of the city. We got the ocean on the one side and the bay on the other side. And, the bay side in our low-lying areas, and I'll say that basically from, say, Union Avenue south toward Coolidge Avenue, which is the border with Longport, those areas, and predominantly Amherst, Monmouth, and Winchester Avenue, flood during a extreme high tide. And, it's not uncommon for us to see water in the streets without having any type of storm. It's just, you get the astronomical tides with the moon and such, and it just brings water into town. And most people are aware of that. But being in the summer, we had a lot of people that didn't heed the warnings and went out and were looking to have a great time that night, went to dinner, and came out to find two plus feet of water along Amherst Avenue, and it created a problem for them.
Yeah, Chief, it was kind of like the perfect storm, right? Because number one, like you mentioned, the weather was nice, even despite coastal flood warnings being up and the prospects of major flooding. People don't necessarily correlate sunshine with tidal flooding, especially summer residents and tourists. You also had a powerful offshore hurricane. You had the summer crowds. What do you think tourists and locals alike were both kind of surprised? Were both caught off guard? And maybe members of your department as well. Were you surprised at the intensity and the widespread nature of this?
I was kind of surprised. I was surprised to the fact that the water didn't recede. The fact that we were 3 hours past high tide and we still had the same water levels along Ventnor Avenue, Winchester Avenue, Monmouth Avenue, and Amherst Avenue. That was shocking to me. I will say that the locals that live in that area, they're always prepared. They move their cars to higher ground. They know what's coming. The tourists that were in town visiting for dinner, or the ones that were just visiting for the summer, had no idea. They did not move their vehicles. And I'm sure we lost, dozens of vehicles to that storm because, when I tell you there was areas where the water was 2 to 3 feet deep in the center of intersections. And then there was areas where there was only 2 to 4 inches. But predominantly, I think that the locals themselves, the ones that see this all the time, were prepared. The people who do not, and the ones that were visiting, having dinner, were not prepared. And they didn't expect it because I'll tell you, when I went down at 6:30 and looked at the bay coming over the bulkhead, there was cars parked right there, and the water was just rushing right through them, so to speak. And it's just not a good place. I mean, for those of us that live here and know this, we park nowhere near those areas. But people went out, they had reservations for dinner, and they just didn't expect it to happen.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some of the specifics that happened with that coming up after the break here. You're listening to Tidal Flooding Talk. Whenever you're ready, Dan.
All right. Welcome back to this week's Tidal Flooding Talk, along with my co-host Joe Martucci and Paul Michaels. I'm Dan Skeldon, joined by Chief Dan Adams of the Margate Fire Department. I mean, peak of hurricane season coming up now in September, Chief, but you probably or hopefully have already had your kind of flagship event of the season. Joe and I and Palmer talk about it on a lot of these Tidal Flooding Talks recently. We've had very remarkably few tidal flooding episodes this year, even the past couple of winter seasons. But you guys had your plan in place nonetheless. You guys have the equipment, the personnel, the knowledge. So did that prepare you adequately to handle a record tidal flooding event in a time of year that we don't normally see it, obviously with a much higher population along the shore? How was the plan executed and how did it go?
Initially, I actually was at my daughter's house doing something for her when I heard the first call go out. And the first call was a gas leak, and it was in a flood prone area. So our guys responded, they took care of that and mediated that call. And then we started to get the calls for vehicles stuck in the water. The first vehicle stuck in the water, I believe, was like Adams and Monmouth, and they had 3 people in the water, in the vehicle. They were stuck in it. They couldn't get out. They called 911 in a panic, and thankfully, we had our high water vehicles out there, and we could get to them in a timely fashion. Um, as far as the plan executed, it worked as well as it was going to. We did hit a point. We ended up having 7 vehicles that we made rescues from, and we actually evacuated 34 people from 2 of our local restaurants back on Amherst Avenue. And I'll say evacuated them because the water in the one restaurant, Sophia's, was probably about 4 to 6 inches deep in the restaurant itself. And the only reason we found out about that was because we got a call for a fire alarm in that building, that the alarm was going off in the elevator well of that building. And my deputy chief, who lives right over the border in Longport, actually responded right to the scene and gave the report that we were going to need to evacuate upwards of 30 people from that location. So it just spiraled from there. And because of that and the number of people, we can only take so many people at a time in the back of the storm truck safely and efficiently and effectively. So we decided to call on our mutual aid partners of the Longport Fire Department. I made a phone call to Chief Clayton, and he was able to get a crew of 5 personnel from Longport, and they put their storm vehicle or their high-wheeled vehicle in service as well. And they went right to these restaurant areas on Amherst Avenue to assist these people. And we brought them back. We opened up a shelter, we'll call it, at Historic City Hall at 1 South Washington, and we brought them back to that location. Some of the people lived close enough to there that they were able to walk home from that location. The ones that didn't, we had them sit tight for a few minutes. We did recall an off-duty shift to bring additional personnel in, because during the process of this, we got a call for a possible electrical fire in a business on Ventnor Avenue. The business owner happened to be looking at their cameras and saw the lights flashing in the store and was concerned and sent us down there. Our guys went down, made entry, and they found smoke in the building. So at that point, to assure that we had a level of protection, I initiated a shift recall, bringing in upwards of 7 off-duty personnel to come back and assist as needed.
Now, you guys, I think you make it look easy with the way your operation runs, but in reality, what are some of the challenges your crews face during a major event like this that maybe we don't see? It's more behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's being prepared. And like I said, after Superstorm Sandy, we took a proactive approach. And that was, Sandy was cold. The water was cold in the streets. And we only had, say, 2 of our Ice Commander suits, we'll call them, our water rescue suits. And we ended up going out and buying 10 additional suits. We also went and issued waders to all of our personnel. So we had chest high waders that each personnel in our fire department are issued as part of their protective equipment. I don't know. The challenges that we see is everybody expects you to be there right away. And when you're dealing with emergency responses in this high water, the last thing we want to do is go rushing through there in quick fashion. And that's twofold. That's one, the potential of damage to our vehicles, but 2, the potential of damage to the businesses and homeowners' homes by sending wakes into their homes. And I started to say it earlier when we were talking during break. The people didn't stop driving down Ventnor Avenue. They didn't stop driving down these streets, and they created such a wake that I believe caused more damage to these businesses and residences. And we actually put a message out the following day for anybody that lived in these areas to make sure they got someone to check their homes, because they may have had flood damage and not even known about it.
Chief, we, like you were saying offline, right? Turn around, don't drown. We always say that you don't know how high the water is. Did you come across any vehicles that, were under moving water, moving water is taking those cars away? And, if so, what was the reaction of the people who were in those vehicles?
We actually had upwards of 7 actual 911 calls from people who were in vehicles that drove into this high water. In fact, one of them was in a panic state. again, Adams and Winchester, I think it was, and they actually called 911 because they couldn't even open the doors of their car due to the pressure of the water on the outside of the vehicle. They were unable to open the doors of their car, and they kind of hit the panic button and got a little excited. We also did have, and I forgot to mention this, we also had two other transformer type fires. You know, in some of the areas of town, we have underground wires, and the transformers sit just above ground. And we had a couple of those that shorted out and caused us a problem. But some of our, ironically, the last water rescue we had with a vehicle was around 11:30, and again, it was at Winchester Avenue. It was at Jefferson and Winchester. It involved a mother with a young 3-month-old child in the car, and they called 911 because they were stuck in the water. Their vehicle wouldn't go anywhere, and they needed assistance. And we sent our crew out with 3 personnel in the storm vehicle. They went out, got them, took them. We brought them back to Station 1, and then we put the car seat in one of our other vehicles, and we drove them home to where their home was in Ventnor. The other thing, we ended up with 3 dogs in one of the cars that we rescued the people. So in total, we had 7 vehicles, 18 people, and 3 dogs, the youngest being 3 months old.
Now, just to put it into perspective, how often do you utilize those storm vehicles or high water vehicles?
Well, it's funny you say that, but I look at this storm vehicles, we call them storm trucks. They're actually military surplus 5-ton cargo trucks that we got many years ago, right after Sandy in 2013. We ended up getting 4 of those for the fire department and 1 for public works. And we got them from Letterkenny, Pennsylvania, through the government surplus program. The city of Margate was able to get them. As long as we kept them for 18 months, after 18 months, we owned them and they were ours. So I look at these vehicles, just like the waders, just like the suits, as just another tool in our toolbox. It's a tool to be prepared in the event that you need them. Hey, if we never need those trucks and they park and they sit and we never use them, that's just fine by me. But the fact that we have them and we have them readily available makes it good for us. In fact, the second high wheel vehicle that we have, and they're actually labeled Storm 2 and Storm 3 because Storm 1 and 4, over time, we sold them off to auction because they just weren't serviceable anymore. Storm 2, we actually carry a 450 gallon per minute pump with a 400 gallon tank. And it's basically like having a fire engine on the back of one of these cargo trucks. And it enables us to get to a potential fire in high water or in a high snow environment. Again, like I said, it's just another tool in the toolbox that enables us to be able to do our job efficiently and effectively.
Great. Well, Chief, we're going to take one more break. We'll come back on the other side of this episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching Tidal Flooding Talk, and we are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. I think our PSA for tonight is as fitting as it can get. Protect your property from flood hazards. Don't let floodwaters ruin your car. Know which streets are prone to flooding and park on higher ground. Remember, driving through flooded streets is never worth the risk. Turn around, don't drown.
Yeah, you can't get.
That being said, I will go on to our next question for you, Chief. How do you coordinate with other departments that you work with?
We actually have mutual aid plans in place all the time. It's basically through our county fire coordinator and through the departments themselves. And we've had a long-standing tradition of mutual aid with the Longport Fire Department. So these are written policies that have been in place for many years. And it kind of goes through the Fire Deployment Act through the state of New Jersey. When you're called upon to assist, unless you can't and you don't have the manpower to do it, you're supposed to be there and provide the assistance as requested as far as these mutual aid, requests come around. So we're definitely, we have a good working relationship with our local departments in Longport and Ventnor. and other surrounding departments as well. When we need them, we call them, and they come right out and give us a helping hand.
Okay, and what about within the city of Margate?
You know what? I have to, I got to give kudos. The police department was awesome in assisting us and blocking the streets the best they could. But I really have to give a shout out to the dispatcher that was working that night, the police dispatcher, Kelly Ferrier. She was unbelievable. The way that she handled all these calls, the way that she handled the communications with us was second to none. The professionalism was just outstanding, and I actually made sure to let her know that, because we appreciate that. Because when we're dealing with emergent situations, the last thing we need is to deal with problems on the radio or trying to deal with that. And she handled each call, as they came in, and provided the information to us so we could effectively deploy our resources.
So, Chief, we always, in many episodes of Tidal Flooding Talk, locals learned a lot from Sandy. Do you think this storm, will kind of sit in the minds of summer residents as kind of a teaching point? Oh, I know what flooding can do now. I know what to do. I know what not to do. Did you get a reaction from any of the people, you rescued, as far as, oh my God, I wasn't aware this could happen, or I was caught off guard, or now I know. Was there any consensus from those impacted as to what they'll take away from this event?
Yeah, they were shocked. They didn't expect to see this. They didn't expect to be sitting in a restaurant and having water at their feet. But I have to say, and I kind of grinned and smiled a little bit when you were saying that, I don't think the outcome's going to be any different the next time. I think we're going to be dealing with the same people, or the same type of people going out there. Hey, they got a dinner reservation. They're going to it. They're not going to miss it. And you know what? We'll be there to do what we can do to make sure we get them home safely. But the big factor was that people driving through this water. If you see water ahead, stop, turn around, go around. There was other routes that they could have gone than the routes they chose. And I'll say that to all 7 of the people who ended up getting stuck. Yes, we're there for them. Our resources were available, but had this been in the middle of a real hurricane, so to speak, and we're dealing with driving force rains and tidal surge from both the bay and the ocean, it's a whole different animal, and it puts our personnel in a situation that could be hazardous.
Chief, I'll end with this. Looks like we'll have time for one more question here. So you half answered my question, which is, you're not surprised that if this was to happen again, right? Because people are just going to do what they want to do. But is there something that we can do? I mean, we're all about the New Jersey Coastal Coalition educating people about flooding. Is it something where, well, if the people who are maybe just here for the summer or for the day don't know, is it something where you go to the restaurants and say, hey, look, you can't do this. It's going to be too much water. Is it something where you can come down from an official local government standpoint? What can be done?
It's funny you say that, but the fact that there was a state of emergency issued at 2:00 in the afternoon that day, I would have thought that we could have had more power in that. But I don't think that, hey, we anticipated flooding, but did we think the flooding was going to be as high as it was? Probably not. But it ended up being significantly higher than we expected, so to speak. I'll tell you what, the forecasters, you guys did an awesome job in predicting that it was going to be somewhere around 7.6 or 7.4. And it was right there. I mean, you guys were right on the money with that. You know what? I'd probably have to kind of speak with the police chief regarding that, and what kind of legal action we could take in those situations to assure that the people are safe. And that's what it boils down to. Were those people in harm's way? Not necessarily, but they were in a situation that they needed assistance getting out of. And that's what we were there for. For the ones that I'm saying that were at the restaurants, they weren't getting in their car and driving away, because that was impossible. So we were there for them to provide them safety, to get them and evacuate them to a safe location. The others that were in the vehicles, they were true rescues, that we rescued those people from the vehicles. I don't really think that the outcome is going to change in the future. I think that we're still going to have people, but if there is a way for us to legally and through government resources try and shut that down so it doesn't happen, whether it's shutting the streets down, whether it's assuring that the people are safe and making the restaurants known that, hey, you got to get these people out of here before the water comes up. It probably would be a great idea, and it's something that we can look into through the city. And I'll hit Palma up for this and get her help to assure that we can make this happen. But all in all, everybody was okay in the end. But people just need to listen to what the forecasters are telling them. And you know what? Dinner will still be there the next night if they can't make it that night.
I don't know. Those reservations are hard to come by, But I think it also raises the question. We've talked about this before. Do you think there's too many warnings that we get? Like, it's going to flood tonight, but then it ends up not being as bad as it sounded on that alert that we got.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that, I have to say, like, I'll go back to it. The National Weather Service was right on the money in their predictions and what they said. But I'll go back to Irene and then into Sandy. If you remember, when Irene happened, we had mandatory evacuations. Everybody had to leave. And then we weren't letting them back in right away. And it was a whole problem. And everybody got upset. The same thing happened with Sandy. And I'll tell you, less people, I think, moving forward now might be a little different, but if we had another storm in 2013 or 14 that was similar to Sandy, a lot less people would have evacuated than they actually did during those other storms, because they had such a hard time trying to get back to their homes to assure that they were safe and that their belongings were okay.
We got about a minute or two left. We're going to do a quick one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. Dan Skeldon, I'll pass it off to you.
I'm going to go unrelated to flooding. I'm going to go food today. Not controversial. I know you got probably a hot button topic you got to choose, Joe, but I'm going to go soup. Can't stop talking about soup because our family tradition starts after Labor Day in the fall. Soup Saturdays. All friends, all neighbors, you guys included, are all invited over. Fresh pot of soup, fresh homemade bread every Saturday through the holidays.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do tidal. So we'll have to do tidal flooding talk at Dan's.
All right,
Dan
sounds
Skeldon's
good.
for the holidays. Maybe let that happen. Palma.
Go ahead, Joe. You always give me an idea.
Well, all right. Listen, I was gonna keep it actually somber today for our tidal flooding talk because as we're recording this week, so it's the week of Labor Day. One person did pass away in Lavalette in Ocean County in the surf today, and it's just it's sad, but it's a reminder that lifeguards, for the most part, are not on the beaches, and what might be 30 seconds to save you now is 2 minutes to save you, and those 90 seconds between 30 seconds and 2 minutes can be life or death. And it's just the water's warm. We know it. It's still nice out. Like, we get it. We understand all that, but really, hang out on the beach, go in the bay, go on the bay shore. It's a little calmer there. Don't go out in the ocean water where there's really no one there to help you out. So good.
Yeah, you did not give me an idea with that one.
I did not think I was. I failed tonight.
Especially when this summer, actually, my stepdaughter took a surfing class 2 different times over the summer, and she loves it. And I think I've definitely laid it on thick about the safety aspect of it because, kids feel like they're invincible, and that's not the case. Everyone has to be careful and be safe. But other than that, it looks like I may be moving come January, so I won't be in Atlantic City anymore. I will still be local.
Okay.
But I see a lot of packing in my future, and yeah.
You don't have to tell us where on camera, but are you staying in a beach town?
No, I'm moving inland.
Wow.
It looks like Egg Harbor Township is where I'm headed. So.
Well, Joe, as co-host, I think we're obligated to help her move, so we'll have to coordinate that as well.
Perfect.
Wow, we're gonna be busy between going to Dan's house for soup and Palma's house to move. I'm gonna have to clear up my calendar. Chief, you're up next. I don't know if you're helping Palma out with the move too. We can all do it together.
I'll always help Palma do anything she needs. She knows that. I got her back whenever I need to or whenever I can help her out. That's for sure. You know what? I'm going to segue off of what you talked about, Joe, because we try and get the message out all the time. Being a former Beach Patrol chief, people need to heed the warnings that are provided, and that is never swim alone, never swim when there's unguarded beaches. I know you want to enjoy the water, but just yesterday into today, that water got really rough again with that northeast wind prevalent yesterday. It was blowing strong. I was down the beach, and that water was very rough, and it was really pulling hard. So, even for the experienced people, you should never swim alone, never go and swim at unguarded beaches. Some of our beaches are protected. If you have to walk a little further or go a little further or drive a little further to an area, if you really need to go to the beach and swim, do that, because like you said, the difference is life and death. After hours, the fire departments are responsible for these water rescues, and it takes us time to deploy our resources down to the beach. So just heed the warnings, pay attention to the forecast, and make a right decision. And sometimes that might be to just stay out of the water altogether.
You're not
Absolutely.
stronger than the ocean, right? Like, have a
No.
little
Hey,
respect for the
I,
ocean.
I'm a big guy, and I was out in the water, and it still pulls you, and the gully. I had my grandson out the other day on a surfboard, and the gully was up to my neck. It was literally, that's how deep the gully was before you got to the sandbar, and then it dropped off, and it was ankle to knee deep on the sandbar. But the gully's that deep, and most kids can't make it through that area, and it's pulling, and they're not strong enough to do it. They shouldn't be out there. And Joe, I thought I heard a rescue off of 49th Street in Ocean City today too.
Okay.
Thankfully, it was a positive outcome, but I did hear that over the radio with the Ocean City Fire Department responding. So
Okay.
we're probably going to hear that a lot over the next couple of weeks. But just listen to what the forecast is, and if you don't need to go in, stay out of the water.
Absolutely. All right. Well, for Chief Dan Adams, Dan Skeldon, Palmas Giles, I'm Joe Martucci. We'll be back with you next week with another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in partnership with our broadcast partner at Tri-X 57.